They thought they were setting a trap for a gold digger. They thought she was desperate, penniless, and lucky just to be breathing the same air as their dynasty. But when the Harringtons forced Odetta to sign that prenup in front of 300 of New York's elite, they didn't realize they were the ones walking into the lion's den. You think you know what rich looks like. Wait until you hear the gasp that silenced a ballroom when the lawyer read the name on her asset list. This isn't a Cinderella story. It's a reckoning. The air inside Le Bernardin was always crisp, smelling faintly of sea salt and old money. For Odetta Jenkins, a freelance illustrator who spent most of her days in paint-stained, oversized T-shirts in a drafty Bushwick loft. The stiff white tablecloths felt like a minefield. She adjusted the collar of her dress, a navy cocktail number she'd found at a consignment shop on 2nd Avenue. It was vintage, or at least that's what the tag said. Next to Catherine Harrington, however, Odetta felt like she was wearing a potato sack. Catherine sat across from her, a sculpture of ice and diamonds. She was wearing a Chanel tweed suit that cost more than Odetta's entire college tuition. Next to her sat Richard Harrington, the patriarch of the Harrington real estate empire, a man who looked at people and saw only square footage and zoning laws. And beside Odetta was Liam Harrington, the man she loved. He reached under the table and squeezed her hand, his palm sweating slightly. He was the golden boy, the heir apparent, but tonight he looked like a child waiting for a scolding. "So," Catherine began, not bothering to look at Odetta as she dissected her scallop with surgical precision. "Liam tells us you're an artist." She said the word artist the way one might say leprosy. "I'm an illustrator," Odetta corrected gently, keeping her voice steady. "I do contract work for publishing houses and some digital marketing firms." "Contract work," Richard grunted, taking a sip of a Pinot Noir that was probably older than Odetta. "Unstable, no equity, no 401k. "I manage Richard," Odetta said, offering a polite smile. "I've never missed rent." Catherine placed her fork down. The metallic clink against the china sounded like a gavel drop. "Rent, precisely. You pay rent, Odetta. We own skylines." Liam cleared his throat. "Mother, please. We're here to celebrate the engagement. Odetta and I, we are here." Catherine interrupted, her eyes finally locking onto Odetta's with terrifying intensity. "To discuss the realities of this union. You are a lovely girl, Odetta. You have a rustic charm, but Liam is a Harrington. The Harrington Trust is valued at $400 million. It is a complex ecosystem of assets, offshore holdings, and legacy properties." Odetta pulled her hand away from Liam's grip. She knew where this was going. She had seen it in the movies, but the reality was far colder. "I'm not marrying Liam for his money, Catherine. Of course not." Catherine smiled, a tight, bloodless expression. "That's what they all say, dear. But love fades. Alimony is forever. If you are truly marrying my son for love, then you will have no objection to signing a prenuptial agreement." Odetta looked at Liam. He was staring at his water glass. "Liam." "It's standard procedure, Odetta." Liam mumbled, still not meeting her eyes. "Dad made Mom sign one. It's how the family works. It protects everyone." "It protects you," Odetta said, a spark of anger igniting in her chest. "It protects the legacy," Richard barked. "We've had lawyers draft it. Arthur Pendleton from Cravath is handling the details. It's ironclad. You leave with what you came in with. Nothing more, nothing less." Catherine reached into her Hermes Birkin bag, and pulled out a thick, bound document. She didn't slide it across the table. She dropped it in front of Odetta with a heavy thud. "We aren't monsters, Odetta," Catherine purred. "We've included a clause. For every year you remain married to Liam, you will receive an allowance of $50,000. Think of it as a salary for being a wife." Odetta felt the blood rush to her face. An allowance, like she was a teenager or a high-end escort. "I don't want your money," Odetta said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I have my own savings. I have my own life." Catherine laughed, a short, sharp sound. "Oh, honey, your savings wouldn't cover the floral budget for the wedding I'm planning. This isn't a negotiation. You sign this or there is no wedding. Liam knows the terms of his inheritance. If he marries without a prenup, he is cut off. Completely." Odetta looked at Liam again. The man who had proposed to her on a rainy rooftop in Brooklyn, swearing that nothing mattered but them. "Liam," she asked again, pleading, "are you going to let them buy us?" Liam finally looked up. His eyes filled with misery and resignation. "Odetta, please. It's just paper. It doesn't change how I feel about you. We can't live on love. I don't know how to be poor. I can't live in Bushwick forever." The betrayal stung more than Catherine's insults. He was choosing comfort over her dignity. Odetta looked down at the document. The Harrington Family Trust versus Odetta Jenkins. She took a deep breath. She could walk away. She could throw the wine in Catherine's face and storm out. That's what a dramatic heroine would do. But Odetta had a secret she had kept from Liam, from her friends, from everyone in New York. She wasn't just Odetta Jenkins from Bushwick. She reached out and touched the leather binding of the document. "Fine," Odetta said, her voice oddly calm. "I'll sign it." Catherine's eyes widened, slightly surprised by the lack of a fight. "Good. We'll have the signing at the engagement party next week in Southampton, in front of the witnesses. We want everything above board." "In front of the party?" Odetta asked. "Public accountability," Richard said. "So you can't claim duress later." "Agreed," Odetta said. She picked up her wine glass and took a sip, masking the small, dangerous smile forming on her lips. "I'll see you in Southampton." The Harrington estate in Southampton was less of a house and more of a monument to excess. It sprawled across 6 acres of oceanfront property, a white colonial monstrosity with manicured hedges that looked like they were trimmed with nail scissors. The engagement party was in full swing. A string quartet played Vivaldi near the infinity pool. Waiters in white tuxedos circulated with trays of caviar and champagne. The guest list was a who's who of New York society hedge fund managers, senators' wives, tech CEOs, and socialites who hadn't worked a day in 3 generations. Odetta stood by a marble pillar watching the circus. She wore a simple, elegant black dress, no jewelry. Liam was across the lawn being clapped on the back by his fraternity brothers from Yale. He looked relieved. He thought the storm had passed. Enjoying the view? Odetta turned to see Catherine standing there, holding a glass of Bollinger. She looked triumphant. "It's a beautiful house, Catherine," Odetta said. "It's a Harrington house," Catherine corrected. "And tonight we secure its future. The lawyers are setting up in the library. Arthur Pendleton is here. We're doing the signing at 8:00 p.m. sharp, just before the toasts." "Why the spectacle, Catherine?" Odetta asked, turning to face her future mother-in-law. "Why not just do it in an office?" Catherine stepped closer, her perfume smelling of tuberose and hostility. "Because, my dear, these people need to see that Liam hasn't lost his mind. They need to see that you know your place. You are the lucky charity case. The signing is a signal to our world that the Harrington walls are still high. My place, Odetta repeated. I see. Don't look so sour, Catherine sneered. You're getting a lifestyle millions would kill for. All you have to do is sign away your claim to it. As 8:00 p.m. approached, the music died down. Richard Harrington stepped onto the raised terrace, tapping a spoon against his glass. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention. The crowd hushed. 300 faces turned toward the terrace. Tonight we celebrate Liam and Odetta, Richard boomed. But in the Harrington family, we believe in transparency. We believe in entering partnerships with eyes wide open. A murmur went through the crowd. This was highly irregular. To that end, Richard continued, gesturing to a large oak table that had been brought out onto the terrace. We are commencing the signing of the prenuptial agreement, a testament to the fact that this marriage is built on love, not financial incentive. There were chuckles from the crowd, cruel, knowing chuckles. They knew what this was. A public shaming, a ritual humiliation of the poor girl. Liam walked up to the terrace looking pale. He beckoned for Odetta. Odetta walked up the stone steps. She could feel the eyes on her, assessing her, judging her. Look at her dress, she imagined them saying. Look at her cheap shoes. She's doing it for the money. Arthur Pendleton, a man who looked like a bulldog in a bespoke suit, stood by the table. He had the documents spread out. Miss Jenkins, Pendleton said, his voice projecting to the front rows. As discussed, this document waives your right to any Harrington assets acquired prior to or during the marriage. You leave with only your personal possessions and assets registered in your name prior to this date. Do you understand? I understand, Odetta said. Her voice didn't tremble. It carried across the silent lawn. And, Pendleton continued, in the spirit of full disclosure required by New York state law, we must annex a schedule of assets for both parties to ensure there is no hiding of wealth. Liam's assets are listed here. The trust, the property, in Hampapu in Aspen, the portfolio. Total value, roughly $412 million. There was a polite round of applause. Liam looked at his shoes. And for Miss Jenkins, Pendleton said, picking up a single thin sheet of paper. He smirked. You were asked to provide a list of your assets and liabilities for the appendix. I did, Odetta said. I sent it to your office this morning. Did you not receive it? Pendleton frowned. My paralegal handed me a sealed envelope just before I arrived. I haven't opened it yet, assuming it was negligible. A checking account and a used car, perhaps? Laughter rippled through the crowd. Catherine was beaming. Open it, Odetta said. It needs to be read, for full disclosure. Ooh. Pendleton sighed theatrically. Very well. He picked up the cream-colored envelope that had been sitting on the corner of the table. He slid a gold letter opener under the seal and tore it open. He pulled out a folded document on thick watermarked paper. Pendleton adjusted his glasses. He looked at the paper. Then he stopped. The smirk vanished from his face. His brow furrowed. He brought the paper closer to his eyes, blinking rapidly. He looked up at Odetta, then back at the paper. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Is there a problem, Arthur? Richard asked impatiently. Read the girls' list so we can sign and have cake. Pendleton cleared his throat. He sounded choked. There seems to be a mistake. What mistake? Catherine snapped. Does she have debt, student loans, we can absorb them? No, Pendleton whispered. He looked at Odetta with a look of absolute terror. It's not debt. Read it, Richard commanded. Pendleton's hands were shaking now. He spoke into the microphone, his voice wavering. Asset schedule for Odetta Sterling. The crowd went dead silent. Sterling, not Jenkins. Sterling, Catherine scoffed. Who is Sterling? Pendleton ignored her. He was reading the list like he was reading a death sentence. Asset 151% controlling stake in Sterling Cobalt and Mining International. Valuation. Pendleton choked. Valuation. $12 billion. A gasp didn't just ripple through the crowd. It exploded. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered on the patio, the sound echoing like a gunshot. What? Liam whispered, staring at Odetta. Pendleton wasn't finished. Asset 2. The Sterling Family Trust beneficiaries, Odetta Sterling and heirs, liquid cash holdings, $1.5 billion. Asset 3 real estate portfolio, including the Sterling Tower in Manhattan, the Château de Lumière in Nice, France, and, wait, this property. Pendleton looked up at Richard Harrington. Miss Sterling holds the underlying mortgage note for the Harrington estate in Southampton, purchased last month through a shell corporation. The silence was absolute. The wind rusting the leaves was the only sound. Odetta stepped forward to the microphone. She looked at Catherine, whose face had gone the color of ash. She looked at Richard, who looked like he was having a cardiac event. You wanted to protect the family assets, Odetta said, her voice cool and commanding, the voice of a CEO, not an illustrator. I agree. It's a smart move. She picked up the pen. But I'm not signing this to protect Liam's $400 million. I'm signing it to protect my $14 billion from you. For 3 seconds, the world stopped spinning. Richard Harrington gripped the podium, his knuckles white. The color had drained from his face so completely that he looked like a wax figure melting in the heat. Catherine, usually the master of the quick retort, stood with her mouth slightly ajar, her eyes darting between Odetta and the terrifying document in Pendleton's shaking hands. 14 billion, someone in the front row whispered. It was Mrs. Van der Veer, the gossip columnist for the Post. She was already typing furiously on her phone under her shawl. Odetta picked up the Mont Blanc pen. It felt heavy, substantial. She looked at the prenup, the document meant to shackle her, to keep her in her place as the lucky poor girl. You know. Odetta said, her voice amplified by the speakers, calm and conversational. My father always told me that prenups are essential. He said, Odetta, wealth attracts parasites. I just never thought I'd be sitting at a table with them. She signed her name. Odetta Sterling. Not the jagged, nervous scrawl of Odetta Jenkins, but the sweeping, confident signature that had authorized billion-dollar mergers since she was 21. She capped the pen and tossed it onto the table. It rolled and hit Richard's hand. He flinched. There, Odetta said, stepping back. Your legacy is safe from me, Richard, and mine is safe from you. As for the house, she gestured to the sprawling mansion behind them. I'll have my property managers contact you about the lease terms. I believe in fair market value. She turned to leave. The reaction was instantaneous. The crowd, previously a wall of judgment, physically shifted. It was a biological response, like sunflowers turning toward the sun. As Odetta walked down the stone steps, the path cleared. People who had looked through her 20 minutes ago were now desperate for her attention. Odetta, darling. It was a woman in a red dress who had earlier spilled a drink on Odetta's shoes without apologizing. We must do lunch. I had no idea you were that Sterling. Miss Sterling. a man called out, extending a business card with trembling fingers. "If you're ever looking for new representation." Odetta ignored them all. She walked with a straight back, her eyes fixed on the driveway. She didn't look at Liam. She couldn't. If she looked at him, the mask would slip, and she would just be the girl whose heart was breaking. "Odetta." "Wait." It was Catherine. She had scrambled down the stairs, abandoning her dignity. She caught up to Odetta near the fountain, breathless. "Odetta, please," Catherine panted, forcing a smile that looked like a rictus of terror. This is a misunderstanding. A joke. Surely you aren't actually the heiress to the sterling cobalt fortune," Odetta finished for her. "The granddaughter of Archibald Sterling." "Yes, Catherine. I am." "But the clothes," Catherine stammered, gesturing at Odetta's simple dress. "The apartment in Bushwick, the contract work." "I like painting," Odetta said simply. "And I live in Bushwick because I own the building. I own the block, actually. I like the coffee shop on the corner." Catherine reached out, trying to touch Odetta's arm, her fingers twitching. "We didn't know. If we had known, things would have been different. We treated you like, well, we were protecting Liam." Odetta pulled her arm away. "That's the point, Catherine. You treated me like dirt because you thought I was poor. If you had known I was rich, you would have treated me like royalty. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. You don't value people. You value net worth." "We can fix this," Catherine pleaded. "The wedding, it will be the event of the century, a merger of two great houses." Odetta laughed, a cold, dry sound. "A merger, Catherine, look at the math. This isn't a merger. It would be an acquisition, and I'm not buying." Odetta signaled to a black SUV idling at the gate. It wasn't an Uber. It was a bulletproof Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows that had been trailing her unseen for months, her security detail. "Odetta!" Liam's voice cracked through the air. He was running toward her, his face a mask of confusion and panic. Catherine stepped back, sensing the volatility of the moment. "Get in the car, Odetta," her driver. A massive man named Thorne said as he opened the door. "No," Odetta said, holding up a hand. "I need to finish this." Liam stopped a few feet away from her. He looked like he'd been hit by a truck. He looked at the heavy security vehicle, then back at Odetta, as if trying to reconcile the woman he slept next to with the titan who had just bought his childhood home. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Yes," Odetta said. "Why?" Liam shouted, throwing his hands up. "Why lie to me for 2 years? Odetta, we lived on ramen noodles. We split the electric bill. I saved for 6 months to buy you that engagement ring. A ring you probably think is a piece of trash. Now, I love that ring," Odetta said softly. "I love it because you worked for it, because it was real." "Real?" Liam scoffed, tears welling in his eyes. "Nothing about us was real. You're a billionaire, Odetta. You played poor, like it was a game. Was I a charity project? Were you studying how the common people live? I was hiding." Odetta snapped, her composure finally cracking. "Do you know what it's like to be a Sterling? I was kidnapped when I was 8. I have had bodyguards since I could walk. Every man I ever dated before you tried to pitch me a business idea on the 3rd date, or accidentally left his portfolio at my house. I wanted to be loved for me, Liam, not for the checkbook." "I did love you for you," Liam argued. "Did you?" Odetta challenged. "Then why didn't you stand up for me tonight?" Liam froze. "Why did you let them humiliate me?" Odetta stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "You sat there, Liam. You stared at your water glass while your mother called me a leech. You let them hand me a legal document that said I was worth nothing. You didn't fight for me. You folded. Liam stammered. I told you. The inheritance. They would have cut me off. I did it for us, so we could have a future. Odetta shook her head sadly. No, Liam. You did it because you're afraid of being poor. And that's the irony. She reached into her purse, a small, nondescript clutch, and pulled out another envelope. She shoved it into his chest. What is this? Liam asked. Open it. Liam tore open the envelope. It was a financial report, a credit check. I did my due diligence too, Odetta said. When your father proposed the prenup, I had my team look into the Harrington finances. I wanted to know what exactly I was signing away my rights to. Liam scanned the document. His eyes widened. This can't be right. It is, Odetta said. The Harrington Trust is empty, Liam. Your father made bad bets on commercial real estate in 2023. The assets are leveraged at 110%, the Southampton house. It was going into foreclosure next Tuesday. That's why I bought the note. I bought the debt to stop the bank from seizing it during the party. Liam looked up, his face pale grey. We're broke. Worse than broke, Odetta said mercilessly. You're drowning. That's why your mother was so vicious. That's why they needed the prenup. They weren't protecting their money from me. They were terrified that if I divorced you and took half, I'd find out that half was actually $40 million in debt. They were trying to trap me into a marriage where I couldn't ask questions. Liam leaned against the Escalade, looking like he was going to be sick. The golden boy facade had shattered. He wasn't the prince rescuing the pauper. He was the pauper, and she was the queen who had been pretending to be a peasant. You saved the house, Liam whispered. I did, Odetta said. Consider it a parting gift. I won't evict your parents. They can live there until they die. I'm not cruel. Parting gift, Liam looked at her, panic rising in his voice. Odetta, wait. We can talk about this. Now that I know. Now that everything is out in the open. Now that you know I'm rich, Odetta asked, raising an eyebrow. Now that you know I can bail out your family. Suddenly, you want to talk. No, because I love you. You loved Odetta Jenkins, the struggling illustrator who looked up to you, Odetta said, opening the car door. I'm not sure you have the spine to love Odetta Sterling. Odetta, please, don't get in the car. Liam grabbed the door handle. Thorne, the bodyguard, stepped forward, his hand resting gently on Liam's chest. He didn't push, but the wall of muscle made it clear. Back off. Odetta climbed into the leather seat. She looked at Liam one last time. He looked small. A boy in a man's tuxedo. I'm going to stay at the plaza tonight, Odetta said. My lawyers will send over the lease agreement for the house on Monday. Read it carefully, Liam. Unlike you, I don't sign things without reading them. She pulled the door shut. The heavy lock clicked. As the car pulled away, Odetta didn't look back at the mansion or the party or the man she had thought was her soulmate. She looked forward into the dark, winding road of the Hamptons. She took a deep breath. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt hollow. Her phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Well played, Miss Sterling. But you didn't check one asset, the Cayman accounts. You think you bought their debt. You just bought their war chest. We need to talk. Odetta frowned. She tapped the screen. Who is this? The reply came instantly. Someone who hates the Harringtons more than you do, and someone who knows that Richard Harrington didn't lose that money. He stole it. Odetta stared at the phone. The game wasn't over. It had just changed levels. The Plaza Hotel suite was the size of Odetta's entire Brooklyn apartment block. She sat on the velvet sofa, still in her black dress, staring at the phone. It was 2 o'clock in the morning. A knock at the door broke the silence. It wasn't room service. It was the guest she had agreed to meet. Her head of security opened the door, revealing a man who looked nothing like a corporate whistleblower. He was young, maybe 25, wearing a hoodie and carrying a battered laptop bag. He looked like he belonged in a tech startup basement, not a high-stakes conspiracy. "Miss Sterling," he said, adjusting his glasses. "I'm Leo. I sent the text." "You said Richard stole the money," Odetta said, skipping the pleasantries. "Prove it." Leo sat down and opened his laptop. He didn't ask for water. He typed furiously for a moment, then spun the screen around. "I used to be a junior analyst at Harrington Global," Leo explained. "I was fired 3 months ago because I asked the wrong question about a wire transfer. I've been tracking their accounts ever since." Odetta looked at the screen. It was a spiderweb of transactions. "You found out the Harrington Trust was empty," Leo said, pointing to a red graph. "Richard made bad bets on commercial real estate, yes, but that only lost him about 50 million. The other 350 million, it didn't vanish, Odetta. It was moved." "Moved where?" "To a shell company called Phoenix Holdings in the Cayman Islands." Leo tapped a key. A document appeared. But here is the twist. Richard didn't sign the incorporation papers for Phoenix Holdings. He knew if the SEC ever looked, his signature would be a smoking gun. Odetta leaned in her eyes, scanning the document. Her breath hitched. "He needed a patsy," Leo said quietly. "Someone with the Harrington name, but without the business sense to check what they were signing. Someone who trusts him blindly." At the bottom of the document, in familiar looping blue ink, was a signature Odetta had seen 1,000 times on birthday cards and valentines. Liam Harrington. "Liam is listed as the sole director and beneficiary of Phoenix Holdings," Leo said. "Richard moved the family fortune into this account, then leveraged the original Harrington company with massive debt that you just bought. When the company inevitably collapses under that debt, the creditors, which is now, you would trigger an audit." Odetta felt sick. And the audit would find that the assets were embezzled by the director of the shell company. "Exactly." Leo nodded. "Richard set it up so that when the house of cards falls, he looks like the victim of a son who looted the family coffers. Richard walks away clean. Liam goes to federal prison for embezzlement and fraud. Minimum sentence 20 years. Odetta stood up and walked to the window, looking out at Central Park. The city lights blurred. It was diabolical. Richard Harrington wasn't just a snob. He was a predator who ate his own young. He had forced the prenup not to protect the money from Odetta, but to ensure Odetta couldn't get close enough to the books to spot the frame-up. "Does Liam know?" Odetta asked. "I doubt it," Leo said. "Liam probably thought he was signing routine trust documents. The timestamps on these transfers align with his graduation week. Richard probably slipped them in a stack of papers to sign between champagne toasts." Odetta closed her eyes. She had walked away from Liam thinking he was a coward who chose money over her. But he wasn't choosing money. He was standing on a trap door with a noose around his neck, and his own father was holding the lever. If Odetta exercised her rights as the new debt holder, if she foreclosed on the Harrington estate as she planned, she would trigger the investigation that would destroy Liam. "You bought the debt," Leo said, closing his laptop. "You hold the gun. The question is, who do you want to shoot?" Odetta turned back to him. The sadness was gone. In its place was the cold, hard steel of the Sterling bloodline. "I need a car," Odetta said to her bodyguard. "We're going back to Southampton." It was 4:30 a.m. when the Escalade rolled back through the gates of the Harrington estate. The party was long over. The white tents looked ghostly in the pre-dawn mist. The ground was littered with plastic cups and soggy napkins, the hangover of a dynasty. Odetta didn't knock. She had the security codes for the gate. They were part of the mortgage documents she had purchased. She walked into the main house. It was silent. She found Liam in the library, the same room where the lawyers had set up hours ago. He was sitting on the floor, his back against a bookshelf, a half-empty bottle of scotch beside him. He was still wearing his tuxedo, the tie undone. He looked up as she entered. His eyes were red and swollen. "Back to evict me personally." He slurred a bitter smile, twisting his lips. "Or did you come to measure the drapes?" "Get up, Liam," Odetta said sharply. "Drink this." She grabbed a pitcher of water from a side table and poured a glass, shoving it into his hand. "Why do you care?" Liam muttered, pushing the glass away. "You made your point. You're the billionaire. I'm the fraud. You win." "You're not a fraud, Liam. You're a scapegoat." Odetta threw the file Leo had given her onto the floor in front of him. The papers fanned out. "Read it." Liam squinted at the documents. "What is this? Look at the signature. Liam, Phoenix Holdings. Do you remember signing that?" Liam picked up the paper. He frowned. This was the trust restructure. Dad said it was to lower our tax burden. He said it was standard. "It wasn't a restructure," Odetta said, kneeling down so she was eye level with him. "It's an offshore shell company. Your father drained the real liquid assets, $350 million, and put them there, under your name." Liam shook his head, the alcohol making him slow. "I don't understand. Why would he put it in my name?" "That's good, isn't it? That means I have the money." "No, Liam." Odetta grabbed his shoulders and shook him. "He leveraged the original company with debt. When the debt implodes, the authorities will look for the missing cash. They will find Phoenix Holdings. They will find your signature. They will think you stole the money from the family business to hide it. Your father set you up to take the fall for his embezzlement." Liam froze. The reality hit him like a physical blow, sobering him instantly. "No, Dad wouldn't. He's tough, but he's not. He's broke, Liam. Desperate men do desperate things. He realized the ship was sinking, so he threw you overboard to use as a raft." Liam stared at the paper. His hands started to tremble. The betrayal was absolute. The man he had spent his whole life trying to please, the man whose approval he had valued over Odetta's love, had sold him out. "He killed us," Liam whispered. "He made me push you away, to protect a fortune that he was stealing from me." "He thought I was a nobody," Odetta said. "He thought I would sign the prenup and disappear. He didn't count on me buying the debt. He didn't count on me having the resources to audit him." Liam looked at Odetta. For the first time all night, the shame in his eyes was replaced by something else. Rage. "What do we do?" Liam asked. "If you foreclose, the investigation starts. I go to jail." "I'm not going to foreclose," Odetta said. She stood up and extended a hand to him. "And you're not going to jail. But we have to move fast. Richard will be awake in 2 hours. By the time he has his morning coffee, we need to have the noose around his neck." Liam took her hand. His grip was firm this time. The boy was gone. "He keeps his private ledger in the wall safe in the study." Liam said, his voice cold. "He thinks I don't know the combination. He uses his mistress's birthday." "Mistress?" Odetta raised an eyebrow. "Oh, you didn't know." Liam let out a dark laugh. "Catherine knows. She tolerates it for the lifestyle. a lifestyle that apparently I paid for. They walked out of the library together. The sun was just starting to crack over the horizon, painting the sky the color of a bruise. They went to the study. Liam moved a painting of a hunting dog and spun the dial on the safe. Right 15, left 22, right 08. The heavy door clicked open. Inside, there was a black ledger and a stack of hard drives. "Bingo," Odetta whispered. "Well, well," a voice boomed from the doorway. Odetta and Liam spun around. Richard Harrington stood there, wearing a silk dressing gown. He was holding a snub-nosed revolver. He didn't look like the panicked man from the party anymore. He looked calm. Deadly calm. "I had a feeling you were smarter than you looked, Odetta," Richard said, raising the gun. "And Liam, I always knew you were weak, conspiring with the enemy in your own house." "You stole everything from me," Liam said, stepping in front of Odetta. "You set me up." "I gave you a life of privilege," Richard shouted, the mask slipping. "You never worked a day in your life. You think that lifestyle is free. Someone has to pay. If you have to spend a few years in minimum security so the Harrington name survives, that is your duty." "The Harrington name is trash," Odetta said, stepping out from behind Liam. She wasn't looking at the gun. She was looking at Richard with pure disdain. "And you're not going to shoot us, Richard." "And why is that?" Richard sneered, cocking the hammer. "Because," Odetta said, pointing to the window, "you're already too late." Blue and red lights flashed against the walls of the study. The sound of sirens wailed up the driveway, piercing the morning quiet. "I didn't just come back to talk to Liam," Odetta said. "I called the FBI on the way over. I told them I was the new debt holder, and I suspected massive fraud. They're here for the books, Richard." Richard's face went white. He looked at the gun, then at the window, then at his son. "Liam," Richard pleaded, his voice cracking. "Tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you signed the papers willingly. Don't let them take your father." Liam looked at the man who had raised him. He looked at the gun that was still pointed vaguely in their direction. "I have nothing to say to you," Liam said. "Officer, in here." The front doors burst open. The sound of heavy boots filled the hallway. Richard Harrington lowered the gun. He slumped into his leather chair, a king without a kingdom. "You should have let her sign the prenup," Liam said to his father, his voice void of emotion. "You really should have." The trial of Richard Harrington wasn't just a legal proceeding. It was a public evisceration. For 3 weeks, the Federal District Court in Manhattan became the epicenter of a media firestorm that consumed the last shreds of the Harrington dignity. Odetta attended every day. She didn't sit in the back. She sat in the front row, directly behind the prosecution, wearing tailored suits that cost more than the Harringtons' now foreclosed Aspen Lodge. She wanted Richard to see her. She wanted him to look at the penniless artist he had tried to crush and see the architect of his demise. The climax came on a rainy Tuesday. Richard took the stand, abandoning his lawyer's advice to remain silent. It was a desperate, arrogant move. He tried to charm the jury, to paint himself as a victim of a complex market and a misunderstanding. But the cross-examination was brutal. The prosecutor, armed with the digital forensics Odetta's team had provided, picked him apart bone by bone. When the verdict was read guilty on all 14 counts of wire fraud, embezzlement, and securities fraud, the courtroom didn't gasp. It exhaled. It was inevitable. Richard didn't scream. He simply slumped, aged 20 years in 20 seconds. But it was Catherine's reaction that haunted Odetta. The Ice Queen didn't cry. She stared at Odetta with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred, mouthing a word that the bailiffs pretended not to see. Catherine was escorted out. Her assets frozen, her furs seized, destined for a life that terrified her more than prison anonymity. 3 months later, the silence at the Southampton estate was heavy enough to weigh on the soul. Odetta walked through the grand hall. The movers had finished days ago. The assets, the Ming vases, the Renaissance tapestries, the gaudy chandeliers that Richard had bought to impress people he didn't like, were all gone. They had been auctioned off to pay the long line of creditors. The house was a shell, a white colonial skeleton stripped of its pretension. "It echoes," a deep voice rumbled. Odetta didn't flinch. She turned to see Thorne, her head of security, standing by the open French doors. He had traded his tactical gear for a linen suit, but his presence was still formidable. "Empty houses always do, Thorne," Odetta replied, her voice echoing off the marble floors. "It's funny. When I came here for the engagement party, this room felt so small, so suffocating. Now it feels like an airplane hangar." "The realtor is calling again," Thorne noted, checking his phone. "He says he has a buyer from Dubai interested in the property, a tech mogul. He's offering 10% over market value." "Tell him the house isn't for sale," Odetta said, running her hand along the banister. Thorne raised an eyebrow. "You're keeping it Miss Sterling, with all due respect. This place is a monument to a family that tried to destroy you. Why would you want to live in their ghosts?" "I don't want to live here," Odetta said, turning to look out at the overgrown garden. "But I don't want to erase it either. If I sell it, someone else just buys the status symbol. I want to change the meaning of the symbol." She walked toward the terrace. "Besides, I have a meeting." "He's at the gate," Thorne said softly. "I told the guards to hold him." "Let him in." Liam Harrington walked up the long, winding driveway. He hadn't brought a car. He had taken the train from the city and walked the 2 miles from the station. He looked different. The soft, doughy look of a man who had never faced a consequence was gone, replaced by a lean, ragged hardness. He wore a cheap grey suit, ill-fitting at the shoulders, and scuffed shoes. He looked tired. He looked like a man who had spent the last 90 days learning how to survive in a world that no longer cared about his last name. Odetta waited for him on the terrace, the spot where the signing ceremony had taken place. The table was gone. The microphone was gone. It was just stone and wind. Liam stopped 10 feet away. He didn't smile. He didn't try to charm her. He looked at her with a mix of shame and a strange new respect. "You look," Liam started, then stopped. "You look like you own the world, Odetta." "I own the mortgage, at least," Odetta said, her face unreadable. "How are you, Liam?" "I'm alive," he said. "Dad is in FCI Otisville. Mom is in Boca living with her sister. I haven't spoken to either of them." "And you?" "I'm working," Liam said. "I got a job as a paralegal, not at a big firm. A legal aid clinic in the Bronx. I spend my days helping people fight eviction notices." He let out a short, dry laugh. Irony has a sick sense of humor. "It's honest work," Odetta said. "It is," Liam agreed. "It's the first honest thing I've done in my life. I used to think I was the good guy, Odetta. I told myself I was protecting you. But watching the trial, hearing the evidence, I realized I wasn't protecting you. I was protecting my inheritance. I was willing to let them humiliate you to keep my safety net." He reached into his jacket pocket. His hand trembled slightly. "I found this in the apartment, when I was packing up my stuff." He pulled out a small, tattered sketchbook. It was one of Odetta's old ones from when they first started dating. It was filled with charcoal sketches of Liam sleeping, laughing, drinking coffee. They were intimate, filled with a love that felt like it belonged to a different lifetime. "I almost threw it away," Liam said, his voice cracking. "But I couldn't. It's the only thing I have left that felt real. But I shouldn't have it. I don't deserve to have it." He stepped forward and placed the sketchbook on the stone wall. Next to it, he placed a small velvet box. "And this?" he whispered. "The ring. I know you said to sell it. I tried. I walked into a pawn shop on 8th Avenue. But when the guy offered me the cash, I couldn't do it. It felt like selling us." Odetta looked at the sketchbook and the ring, the artifacts of a dead relationship. She felt a pang in her chest, not of regret, but of mourning. She mourned the Odetta Jenkins who had drawn those pictures. That girl was gone. Odetta Sterling had killed her to survive. "You testified," Odetta said quietly. "You took the stand against your father. You confirmed the signature was coerced. You saved yourself, but you also nailed the coffin shut on him." "He nailed it himself," Liam said, his eyes hardening. "I just handed you the hammer." He looked at her, searching for something in her eyes. "Forgiveness. A second chance. I miss you." Liam admitted the words hanging in the air like smoke. "I miss the coffee shop. I miss the drafty loft. I miss the way you smell like turpentine. I know I messed up, Odetta. I know I broke it. But I'm rebuilding. I'm trying to be the man you thought I was. Is there any version of the future where we try again?" Odetta looked at him. She saw the sincerity. She saw the pain. And she knew with absolute clarity the answer. "No, Liam." The words were soft, but they struck him like stones. "We can't go back." Odetta continued, her voice steady. "You're rebuilding, and I'm proud of you for that. Really. But you're rebuilding on the ashes of what we had. You can't build a house on ash. Every time I look at you, I see the man who sat silently at Le Bernardin, while his mother called me a whore. I see the man who signed a shell company document without reading it. I can forgive you, Liam, but I can't unsee you." Liam nodded slowly. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just absorbed the blow. "I understand," he whispered. "Keep the sketchbook," Odetta said. "Remember that someone loved you that much. Use it as a standard. Don't settle for anything less than that kind of love again. And don't ever let money get in the way of it. And the ring, leave it," Odetta said. "It belongs to the house now." Liam looked at her one last time, memorizing her face. Then he turned and walked away. He walked down the stone steps past the empty fountain and down the long driveway. Odetta watched him until he was just a speck in the distance, disappearing into the shadows of the gate. She picked up the ring box. She didn't open it. She tossed it casually over the balustrade. It fell 50 feet and landed in the overgrown rose bushes below. Buried. "Thorne," she called out. The security chief stepped out from the shadows. "Yes, Miss Sterling. Call the contractors. I want the renovation started on Monday." 6 months later, the roar of a chainsaw had been replaced by the sound of a cello. The Southampton estate was unrecognizable. The gates were open permanently. The high security walls had been painted with murals, vibrant, chaotic, beautiful scenes of New York City life. Odetta stood on the lawn holding a clipboard. She wasn't wearing a suit. She was wearing paint-splattered overalls. "Miss Sterling!" "Look," a 10-year-old girl named Maya ran up to her holding a canvas. It was a messy, brilliant painting of a dragon eating a skyscraper. "It's magnificent, Maya." Odetta laughed, kneeling down. "But I think you need more red." More red! Maya shrieked and ran back to her easel. The lawn was covered in them. Easels, sculptures made of recycled metal. A dance troupe, practicing on the patio where Richard Harrington used to smoke his cigars. A large bronze plaque had been mounted on the front pillar of the house. It gleamed in the afternoon sun, the Sterling Institute for the Arts. Dedication to the dreamers who were told they weren't enough. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb. A reporter from the New York Times stepped out. She had an appointment for an exclusive interview. "Miss Sterling," the reporter said, looking around in awe. "This is unexpected. This property is valued at $50 million. You could have turned it into a resort, a headquarters, anything. Why an art school for underprivileged kids?" Odetta wiped a smudge of blue paint from her cheek. She looked up at the house. In the window of the master bedroom, formerly Catherine's sanctuary, she could see a group of teenagers learning graphic design on state-of-the-art computers. "My ex-mother-in-law once told me that art wasn't a real job," Odetta said, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. "She told me that assets were the only things that mattered. She said they owned the skyline." Odetta gestured to the kids, to the chaos, to the joy that filled the air. "I wanted to prove her wrong. She used this house to keep people out. I'm using it to let people in. I'm using her legacy to fund the next generation of artists who will paint the skylines she only knew how to buy." The reporter smiled. "That's quite a revenge." "It's not revenge," Odetta said, picking up her brush and turning back to her own canvas. "Revenge is bitter. This is a masterpiece. And that, my friends, is how you rewrite the ending. Odetta Sterling didn't just win the war, she changed the battlefield. She took the symbol of the Harringtons' greed and turned it into a factory for dreams. It's a powerful lesson. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's taking their weapons and using them to build something beautiful. But I have to ask you, what about Liam? In that final scene, he seemed truly changed. He was working hard, he was humble, and he kept that sketchbook. Did Odetta make the right call by closing the door forever? Or do you think true love deserves a second chance, even after a betrayal like that? I want to hear your thoughts. Type Team Art. If you think Odetta was right to choose her future, or Team Second Chance, if you think she should have forgiven Liam. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please like this video. It helps us bring more dramas to life. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, so you're the first to hear the next scandal. Thanks for watching, and remember, your worth is never determined by a comma in your bank account.